Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of Policy and Resources Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking, and please raise your electronic hand should you wish to speak. Okay. I would now ask if we have any apologies or substitutes.
Yes, Convener, apologies from Councillors Fairweather and Shepherd, with Councillors Proctor and Devine substituting. I can also confirm that Councillors Cheap, Wan, Gall and Proctor are attending remotely.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? Okay, and move on to item 3, the minutes. So we've got the minutes of the previous meeting on the 2nd of May. Are those approved?
Agreed.
And the minutes of the special subcommittee on the 28th of November. Are those approved? Thank you. Now move on to item 4, which is the motion in terms of Standing Order 25.1. And this has been submitted by Councillor Proctor. Now, I presume everybody's had a chance to read the motion, and I'll ask Councillor Proctor if he'd like to talk to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Colleagues, as the Convener has said, the motion is there on your papers. It's quite simple, it's quite straightforward. The reason that I have asked you and colleagues to support this motion is to get the Chief Executive to approach Scottish and Southern Energy Network and others that's listed in the motion to reconsider the timeline regarding their cut-off time for the proposed piling and power line. The timeline of the 23rd of this month, I feel, is not sufficient, and we have found that there are numerous people in the county, in my ward and in others, who, for whatever reason, have been unaware of what's been happening and have not managed to take up into the consultation that was offered. For example, there was one consultation in my ward in Westmuir and Kirriemuir. Few people attended that because a lot of people were working, but more importantly, for whatever reason, there was a lot of people who weren't aware that it was taking place. And I do feel that this is a very, very important project, and that my motion is in no way to delay or to affect the route of the power lines, but as I said, to delay and give more consultation time and allow people to take part in consultation and be fully informed. I know that some people were informed, but as I said earlier, many others weren't. I do feel that this, as I said, is something which is very, very important, and the project will not just affect our lives or the lives of our children, or indeed our grandchildren, but of generations to come. And I remember when the power lines were erected in my area of Angus to bring electricity, much needed electricity, to the glens, Angus Glens and the farms there, and they've been a boon, and they've been there and they're now part of the landscape. But what here is proposed is something completely different. And I would ask you to support the motion, to ask the Chief Executive to write and see if we can have a delay in the timing until October, so that there's proper consultation.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Proctor, it was just a reminder not to make any comment on the actual proposals themselves and just stick to the consultation period.
No, thanks very much, Convener. Well, as I said, to make sure that the Chief Executive can write on our behalf and on behalf of the people who are affected in Angus. I hope you support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Does anybody have any questions?
Could I say a second of Gavin Nicholl?
Thank you, Gavin. Would you like to comment on the motion?
Thank you very much, Convener. I'd like to echo what my colleague has put forward in his motion. I'm not against the project or the Scottish Government attempt to greener Scotland, but sorry? Oh, aye. But as Councillor Brechin and Edzell, I've had many concerned inquiries from constituents in Edgell, Innsbare, Tannadice, and many of the farmers on the proposed route of the massive pylons, which will be there for all to see into the next century. I believe we need to have the consultation period extended to allow time for all parties to discuss the project and the options that can be brought forward. I second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. And just another reminder not to comment on the actual proposal itself. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to agree with Councillor Proctor in that there certainly hasn't been enough consultation as yet. In particular, four councillors weren't even invited to any of the meetings, and indeed the Community Council wasn't either. So there have been some flaws in this consultation, so I'd very much welcome this prolongation of it. We are escalating this through our parliamentary colleagues, however, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Any further questions? Any comments? Do we agree the motion?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Convener.
Okay, we move on to item 5, which is the Angus Community Plan. Now, members will note that item was previously presented to this committee on the 15th of February. However, I've determined in terms of Standing Order 26.2 that there's been a material change of circumstances within 6 months of consideration of report number 1223 as a result of the amendment to the governance structure, and that it is appropriate for the issue to be reconsidered in terms of recommendation 3 contained within report number 16323. Okie doke. Now, I just point out again that this is this report's here for the governance issue. We've already considered the community plan at this committee. So today we're looking at the recommendations around the governance. Does anybody have any questions on the report? No questions. Any comments? No. Okay, the recommendations are that we note the previous decision of the committee, we note the subsequent decision of the Community Planning Board, and we note that the decision of the Community Planning Board referred to in 2 above constitutes a material change of circumstances. And recommendation 4, we approve the amendment to the governance arrangements to only have one Angus Community Planning Partnership Board. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We now move on to item 6, which is the Common Good Fund project approval. And I'd ask Director of Infrastructure if you'd like to present the report.
Afternoon. Thank you, Convener. This report advises members on a common good funding application received to undertake flood prevention works to the pavilion at the Crickety, Brechin, and seeks committee approval to fund the project from the Brechin Common Good Fund in 2023-24. I would draw the committee's attention to the appendix of the report, and in particular that we have consulted with all of the local elected members, and that all of the local members were agreed, it was unanimous, to support the 100% funding of the application as detailed in the report.
Thank you, Mr Daly. Does anybody have any questions? No. Any comments? Councillor Beattie. Thank you,
Convener. Yeah, I'd just like to say that we agreed this because the Brecon Buccaneers and the Cricket as an organisation and as a place in Brecon does an absolutely fantastic job for all the people in Brecon, and that use it. And that's why we decided to back it. Thank you. Any further comments? It does seem like a very pragmatic decision. We're asked to approve to fund the additional project from Brecon Common Good Fund. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we are now on to item 7, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund update. And we've got Ms Patterson here to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides an update on delivery of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is a fund managed by UK Government. Before you is the details of the investment plan that was submitted to the UK Government in August last year under delegated authority due to the timescales involved in its preparation. Also included within the report before you is the financial profile of the funding of 4.91 million to Angus over the 3-year period. That fund has been reprofiled due to the late sign-off of investment plans across the UK and the short timescale for spend in year 1, which is the 2022-23 period. UK Government had advised all local authorities that underspends from year 1 could be carried forward to the year 2 period, which is the 23-24 period. Also within the Scottish area, the UK Government had advised that the multiply funding, which is the only ring-fenced element of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, could be reallocated to other intervention areas across the investment plan and did not need to be carried forward from the year 1 period. So the report today sets out the revised profiling, which carries forward the year 1 underspend and the revised profiles for year 2 and year 3 within the 3 priority areas and also the multiply area, and the allocations against the relevant interventions within that. It also asks for delegated approval to the Director of Vibrant Communities and Sustainable Growth to enter into any sub-agreements and signing of agreements with third parties. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this report? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. It wasn't the easiest report to read. In fact, it was quite difficult, but just a couple of small questions. One on page 55, this is on multiply, S45, courses aimed at encouraging people to upskill to access jobs and careers. Do I take it that there's quite an element of digital upskilling in this? Because I didn't see much digital work there, and we all know that that's absolutely essential for jobs these days. The other question was on page 62. Oh, no, sorry, no, sorry, I'll just leave that one. Oh, it is 62, sorry. Outdoor tourism destination. This is the Tay Cities Region Tay Adventures feasibility study, and I was wondering, well, I'm hoping that Angus is going to see a big chunk of this, because we really do need to have some destination features in Angus. Dundee and Perth and Kinross really do well with their tourism, but we could certainly do with more. I don't know if you can answer that question, but I'd appreciate your comments on it anyway.
Okay, to pick up your first point regarding the Multiply Fund, it's very specific ring-fenced element of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The driver behind that is an increase in numeracy, and the specifics behind that relate to Level 5 maths, which has precluded probably some of the scope of what that fund could be allocated towards. Within Angus, we've taken the decision to retain some of that funding to support numeracy work in the communities, and they will be embedded within the Vibrant Communities team, working right across Angus, which will give that interlink to those other skills that are available. The remainder of the funding, due to the level of support required in maths, we've taken the decision and working with Angus College to provide a pathway from those numeracy in the community courses into Dundee and Angus College, who will be providing specific skill support for numeracy as part of their existing programmes, as well as some community development work. So there will be a little bit of digital element within that, but that will also be picked up under the people and skills interventions that are set out in the people and skills priority. That helps. On the tourism aspect, so the Tay Adventures feasibility study, that was one of the Tay Cities Deal projects, and it was felt that additional resource was required from all 4 authorities to scope out that project in a lot more detail. That work is underway at the moment, and the positive feedback we've had to date is that the Angus projects within that are scoring quite well in terms of the overall picture for the Tay Adventures area and that project. Moving forward, there is quite a bit of work going on at a regional level to enhance the regional offering in terms of tourism, and there's quite a bit of support available, and you'll see it through the supporting local business priority for tourism marketing campaigns and tourism work as part of that, which we're looking to develop in conjunction with Angus Tourism Cooperative as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you there. Thanks, Jill. You kind of hinted at it. I just wondered if you could give me a wee bit of detail on the Multiply aspect around any assessed need for numeracy skills in the community. Thanks.
I think the feedback we've had, and similar to other local authorities we're working with, was that the need and demand perhaps didn't match the level of allocation of funding that had been ring-fenced for Multiply, and that's been a similar picture across most Scottish authorities, and particularly in the Tayside region, is that yes, there are small pockets of numeracy support that are available, but it wouldn't perhaps be the top priority of where local authorities would choose to invest the funding. That certainly has underpinned the approach, and I think it's a welcome approach that we're able to reallocate that year 1 Multiply to move it to just within the people and skills priority, but gives us that more cross-section across the board. One of the bits of work we're undertaking with Dundee and Angus College is to make sure that numeracy provision is right across the board. So as well as looking at people that are in work and upskilling those and adding on the maths to those existing courses, it's also tapping into that broader range of need. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a specific level that's sought within that. So again, it's just getting that balance between some of the work that our communities are able to do at that very baseline level doesn't necessarily tap into the requirements of the Multiply funding.
Thank you. Have any further questions? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much. Just a question. How are we getting on with the levelling up fund in relation to the Caledonian Railway?
So at the moment, we've not had notification from UK Government of the round 3 of levelling up fund. However, work is underway in terms of working with consultants, and the tender proposals have come back for those, and officers are progressing that in conjunction with the Brecon Caledonian Railway and other projects that we may wish to put forward. And a report will be brought back in due course once that work is underway and completed. But we will keep members informed of that as it progresses.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Convener. Jill, just again on page 53, and we're looking at the table, and in 5.7 there is a line there, S5, support sports, arts, cultural heritage and creative activities. Would there, I mean, there are 2 museums which have been handed back to the council from Angus Alive, Brechin and the Gateway at the Glens. Would people who are considering taking on the running of these places, would they be be able to apply for grants and to help them with a project? Is that a possibility?
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. So actually coming back to Councillor Bell's point about the report, the actual fund itself is quite flexible but also quite complicated at the same time. So although there's specific allocations against interventions in those tables, effectively you could have a project that meets 5 different interventions, so it could be drawing funding from different pots. What we've been working with is, through our Vibrant Communities colleagues, is to develop an Angus Place Prosperity Fund, which will cover a handful of these interventions and will go out to all parties, including internal council services, third parties and community groups, and there will be different strands to that fund. One of the funds will include feasibility studies. So you'll see under S11 we have 85,000 allocated to feasibility studies. That will be available to all parties to bid into to take forward work to perhaps support the development of a project or otherwise. We've also been looking at a seed fund effectively, so that if a community were to take on a particular asset, that there may be some revenue costs that could support the early running of that facility. The fund, as mentioned in the report, covers both capital and revenue, and we can switch money between the two as long as we meet our minimum capital target each year.
Thank you very much, Joe. Very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. I know I am incredibly pleased to be able to see any amount of money that's coming in that's going to help boost tourism within Angus, and I think we'd all very much welcome that. So, how, with all the work that we're going to do within this to try and boost this and bring people into Angus to show off our county to its best, how much negatively would it be affected by the introduction of a tourism tax?
I think it's difficult to say within that context without knowing the detail. Certainly my colleagues within economic development have been engaging with industry and the Angus Tourism Cooperative around the early sort of papers on that, and until we see those details and more concrete, we're difficult to say in terms of that. I think the feedback from industry across the board at the moment is that it's difficult for small business. The current costings, energy costs, etc., are seeing challenges within that area. As I say, we have been in close contact with our colleagues at Angus Tourism Cooperative, who are the industry body for local business in Angus, who have flagged up some concerns around that, but it's too early for us to provide anything more concrete till we see the detail.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Darno.
Thanks, Convener. Jill, obviously funding is a problem for councils, and obviously getting this money from the UK government. With our council now, who's actually going to facilitate this? I mean, is it going to go through our Rhonda McFarlane to allocate this? Because there's quite a big remit on this for, hundreds of people applying for it. So who's going to really coordinate all this? Because we don't have a lot of staff nowadays.
Well, that's a good question. So there is a percentage, we can take a 4% top slice off the fund to put towards resource to manage the fund. There's quite a stringent reporting requirement against each of these interventions, which we have to provide feedback on quarterly to UK government. We have brought in a full-time member of staff, Victoria Gibbons, who's going to be working on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund moving forward. What we're looking to do, and what we've referred to in the investment plan submission, was that we are challenged in terms of resource. The default position of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was competitive grant process. We have flagged up the challenges around the resource commitment of that in our investment plan. So, as indicated in the report and in our investment plan, some of that funding will be direct award within the council to third parties, and we have taken the decision to try and manage it under these bigger funds. So The Place Prosperity Fund that I mentioned earlier is looking to amalgamate 2 or 3 different funds so that we're doing one process. It's not confusing for communities. It's one big launch, one series of engagement to develop communities around what's on offer. And because this is a 2-year fund, we can effectively roll projects across the 2 financial years. In terms of the reporting outcomes, it'll be big projects, big outcomes and big outputs from that. So it's moving away from the small pots of money that are quite heavy on the administrative side to manage, but moving towards these bigger projects for communities. So there will be a de minimis amount in terms of the grant funding, and colleagues in Vibrant Communities are working with myself and colleagues to just develop that detail, which is just about there.
Thank you for your really extensive replies. It's obviously a huge bit of work there. Councillor Speed.
Thanks, Convener. It was really just to find out when there'd be a kind of a report coming back with progress. Is that something that we can look to agree into?
Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Speed. I'm absolutely happy to do that and take a steer from yourselves and timescale. Now we have an officer in place. What I would suggest is I go back to them, we align that with the UK Government's reporting timetable and factor in some committee dates to bring an update to yourselves, even if that's an information report to you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Cheap.
Thanks, Convener. Just to be quite sure here, for the avoidance of doubt, Jill, could I ask you, just do community groups, how do they apply for funding of this, or how's it being organised so that the community groups can actually access funds and put forward projects for this? Just to be absolutely clear here, is it being led through council, or should they be making applications direct? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. So the intention at the moment is to develop some of this funding through the Place Prosperity Fund that I mentioned, via our Vibrant Communities service with input from myself and colleagues in economic development. So there will be a call out to community groups that will also be open to council services and our colleagues in Angus Alive and other third parties to bid into. And officers will bring forward the detail of what that programme looks like. They're just working up the final details of that, and the intention is to launch, I think, in August time.
So I can just come back to me on that, just to ask a question: whether will that be intimated to us again, Jill, as to once that's all been worked up, as you say, how it will then be carried forward?
Absolutely, Councillor Cheap, and we will be liaising with all of you as elected members to give you a heads up on the time frame for that and the details of what funds are available, what the amounts are and what opportunities there are for community groups. That, I think, an early work with our community development teams already flagging up these opportunities with the community groups they're working with, but we'll make sure that any information available to you all.
That's excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. On page 66, there's an additional intervention which I'm extremely pleased to see. Young people have become some young people have become quite disengaged since the pandemic, and this will have a detrimental effect for their future. So I'm really glad to see that there's going to be increased work input. Communities have also been suffering from increased vandalism, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that this work will pay dividends and help these young people to see that, in fact, there can be a positive future for them.
Thank you. I was also pleased to see that new intervention. That's very well. Okay. Another comment, Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Councillor Gregg asked a question regarding tourist tax, and Ms Patterson gave a very comprehensive answer to that. And I just wanted to reiterate that this administration does highly value the tourism sector in Angus, and elected members in the Communities Committee team, convenership team, have had discussions with representatives from the Tourism Corps. We will be continuing to do so because we do realise the pressure that that sector is under. Thanks.
Thank you. If there's no further... Councillor Speed.
Yeah, just for clarity, it was just in response to my question, and in terms of timescales for reporting back. Is that something that we're kind of going to look to agree or give an approximate, just given that there obviously is government timescales as well that we would need to take into consideration?
Do we have a timescale at this point?
It's slightly challenging at the moment. We're still just awaiting the year 2 sign-off from our year-end submission, and the programme of reporting arrangements for this year. What I can do is commit to bring something back in the autumn period. I've just check the dates and let you know, probably maybe not the first policy and resources, but the one thereafter is to do an information report. But if there's something needed, and then conscious that for this first year fund, we've got quite a lot of things just about ready to launch. So I'm happy to do a more informal briefing and then bring something more formal back in the autumn period.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any further comments? Councillor Gregg.
Sorry to let you that Councillor Proctor has his hand.
Councillor Proctor.
Thanks very much, Convener. All I'd just like to say, I'd just like to thank and congratulate Ms Patterson and her team for bringing this report forward, and also to thank the UK Government for the funding that's going to make all this happen. So I hope we maximise this through our communities. And again, well done, Ms Patterson and her team. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, we'll move to recommendations. We're asked to note the updated profile of spend, note the approach to the allocation of funds, and delegate the sign agreements. Is the report agreed? Thank you. Item 8 on the agenda, possible exclusion of public and press. Consider in terms of Standing Order 28.2 whether the public and press should be excluded during consideration of the following items so as to avoid the disclosure of information which is exempt in terms of Part 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Is that agreed? Thank you.
John, can we stop the live stream, please?